Good evening. Welcome everybody to our parent panel for our 2024 transition series. Thank you for being here. I want to thank so much the parents that are here tonight. So let me take a minute to introduce you all. And then what we're going to do, everyone's going to kind of introduce themselves and share a little bit about their own personal story. And then we're gonna ask questions and have them each touch on different topics through transition. And then for those of you who are joining us, you are all muted. Please put your chats into either to the chat box or the Q&A, and we'll have time to get to those in case they're not answered throughout the presentation. Okay, so thank you all so much. So let me introduce you all. This is Janet Reese, obviously parent. Janet also works at the Alexandria City Parent Resource Center, or Alexandria High School's Parent Resource Center. Nicole Zupan works with FCPS. Sarah Settle, mom of Lawrence, who also publishes a magazine that she'll talk a little bit about, and Donna Budway, parent of Emma, but also works with our stomping ground. So lots of knowledge here in the Zoom room. So what I would like you all to do is if you can kind of start, and let's see, Janet's first on my screen, so I'll let you go first. Just kind of talk a little bit about yourself and share a little bit about your transition and your children.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. I really am very appreciative of being here. So, as you said, Diane, I also work for Alexandria City Public Schools as the family support specialist. So I actually work with all families, including families of children with preschoolers through high school in Alexandria. Um, I came to this because I am the parent of three children. Both of my boys have autism. My older son is very low support needs and is in college. My younger son has much more intense needs. His name is Philip. He has the IDDD waiver, and he was on the waiting list for that for 7 years. So I encourage anyone who is still thinking about applying for it to go ahead and do that because it takes a very, very long time. Um, he has a job coach through DARS, and he actually has two jobs, which is great. Um, and one of the things I know you had asked us to mention, and I don't know if you want me to talk about it now, is legal authority. Do you want me to do that? Okay. So Philip actually is under guardianship. This was a very difficult decision to come to, and I think it's important for families to give themselves permission to do what they think is going to be the absolute best thing for their own individual child. There are different options. There are benefits to each of the different options. For us, in our particular situation, we felt that Philip, because he's a very sweet and trusting and naive young man who constantly wants to please other people, we felt that he was at great risk for being easily taken advantage of. And as a result, we felt that the guardianship was going to be the best way to keep him safe. Having said that, we certainly take his wishes into consideration. I always consult with him before we make a big decision to try to go along with his wishes as much as possible. So that's kind of where we are.
Thank you, Janet. Nicole, you're next on my screen. So up to you.
Thank you, Diane. I'm Nicole Zupan. I am currently working with Fairfax County Public Schools as a learning disabilities teacher. But before that, I was working for the ARC as a support coordinator. I have two children, one of whom is an autistic adult, 24-year-old son. And as Janet mentioned, he has the DD waiver. Like Janet, we were on that list for a very long time. He was actually on it for 13 years. And what I would recommend it also is that you get yourself on that wait list as soon as you can, if you haven't already. And I think one of the big things, realizations I came to late in the game, and it was sort of forced on me, was that in addition to updating the case manager while you're on the wait list about your child's challenges, things that are coming up, any medical things that come up, always make sure that you let them know what's going on with you, because you're the caregiver and or your partner are the caregivers, and you can't take care of your loved one if you're not taking care of yourself. And so what I ended up, we had some medical issues with my spouse, and then our son exited out from the Fairfax County schools in June of 2022, and we were not able to find care. So and back then I was working for Fairfax County schools as well. So I ended up having to quit my job because we didn't have care and we didn't have the waiver at the time. So between my spouse's medical conditions and then me having to quit my job, I just kept like weekly calling up our support coordinator and letting her know about that. And finally, they're like, okay, great. We're going to put you forward. You sounds like you really are in a position right now where you need it. And ultimately, we got it in the following summer. So I just really encourage people to think about the whole picture. It's a very holistic thing. Excuse me. That let them know what your situation is as well, on top of your individual. Our son went to the Davis Center, which we were very happy with. He learned some neat skills there, and he's not using all of them now, but he transitioned to a group home in January of this year, and he's able to do some things there, I think, because of some of the work he did at the Davis Center, and because I'm huge on giving both of my kids chores so that they can learn just some independence and self-sufficiency. And because I noticed early on, even when he was younger, that our son was very, very happy when he successfully did something on his own. He didn't need me telling him what to do. And so that has been able to be carried forward. And I would just really find what your individual loves or loves to do, and let them see what that can turn into, what skills are involved in that thing, and see if that can turn into an activity, whether it's a job or volunteering or what have you, and then have close ties to the community. I think that's really, really critical, not only from a support aspect, but also for your individual to feel part of a larger picture. I think that's really important. Thanks.
Thank you, Nicole. Donna, do you want to go ahead?
Great. Hi, my name's Donna Budway. My daughter Emma, our youngest, is 27 years old. She is an autistic and unreliable speaker who spells to communicate, and she also has a seizure disorder. So I should say that she presents as quite loud and sometimes dysregulated. And so that will surprise you when I tell you the next part of her story is that 5 years ago, she actually moved into her own apartment and our stomping ground property, their first property on Columbia Pike in Arlington. And because of her disability, she qualifies for a live-in aide who lives rent-free in exchange for supporting Emma overnight. Which has been a wonderful, wonderful arrangement. We just started on our fourth roommate. This is not for the faint of heart, but we've got another great match. And she's getting her PhD, so I'm hoping this one's going to last about 6 years. So that is exciting. For Emma's employment, she does work for another non-speaking autistic man who started his own business, and we're really excited to be part of that workforce. Emma does glass recycling with a little team. I think he has employed 4 or 5 of his friends, which is great. So she gets a little stipend from that. And she also sometimes gets paid for her advocacy. She did a project with the Ford Foundation trying to convince Arlington County Schools explain the letter of the law, actually, and the dream of Olmsted that we should have inclusive schools. So she spent a good amount of time presenting and talking, and she sometimes is paid work. At a pretty young age, we were encouraged to apply for this, at the time, the EDCD waiver, which then now is a CCC plus because of her seizures. And so she was on that for quite a good bit, but we were alarmed to find out at some point that did not put her on the waiver wait list. So if you are on the CCC plus waiver, I would encourage you to go to your caseworker and make sure that at any point, like if anything changes, that you would want to be considered for the Medicaid DD waiver. And we were, when Emma moved out, that, makes everyone a little bit more priority. They're out of the family home. So she then moved over. She was offered a slot, an FIS, a Family Individual Support Waiver, which does not come with housing supports. But for a lot of our friends, you can get either SRAP, the State Rental Assistance Program. There's still slots available in Fairfax County, or there are the Housing Choice Voucher, or for Emma's property, it was actually a program-based waiver that gives her rent supports there. And the last thing we were asked to talk about was guardianship. And when Emma turned 18, I have to tell you, that seems like a century ago, almost a decade ago, people were not talking. We had no Britney Spears. We were not really talking about supported decision making. That didn't come around to us a little bit later. But we had been advised by some advocates, some great advocates, and our friends at the ARC of North Virginia that she was very politically engaged and that it would make sense for her to request to keep her voting rights. So I would encourage anyone that has a son or daughter or loved one that is interested in that to recognize, even with guardianship, you can vote. And then we did a little pilot with the ARC where Emma went through supported decision making, and we have been operating under that model ever since, although she's still under official guardianship, because of Delegate Hope's great work and also the ARC in Northern Virginia. There's new legislation now that allows for people under guardianship, instead of having to go back and hire an attorney and spend thousands of dollars, she is now in the process of drafting her letter to the court asking to be taken out of her guardianship, and she will continue to work with her supported decision making. So we will let you know how that goes. That was my button to get off, but I will just say that we were able to make that decision because that was one of her goals. And also we are getting her very close to typing independently. Okay, next up.
Thanks, Donna. I just want to say Donna brought up a whole lot of stuff there. So for those of you who are on this Zoom meeting, we did have earlier this week lots of presenters. We had 2 presenters on supported decision making and legal authority. So if you haven't watched those, watch those. Donna also touched on housing, which is a big topic in and of itself, and we'll be having webinars on that next week. So if anything she said there was confusing to you, you'll learn more next week. So Sarah, go ahead.
Hi. Okay.
You're up.
Thank you so much. I'm Sarah Sattel. I'm a publisher of Jagged Lines, a magazine dedicated to providing valuable resources and information about special education, services, and advocacy for the autism community. So through personal stories, interviews, and essay, the magazine serves as a support tool for families and professionals. I'm also the mother of a 23-year-old autistic young adult and former autism teacher. My son is currently attending NOVA, the Northern Virginia Community College. We receive funding from the Community Service Board to support his participation in a full-day social and academic program run by College Steps. Although we are registered with DARS, which is the Department of Aging and Rehabilitative Services, for those who don't know it, most of my son's services, like job training, social skills, and academic support, come through College Steps, with the CSB funding playing a key role. We don't have a guardianship because Lawrence, at the moment, I would say, is low support. But we have what is called the support decision making, so that before he makes an important decision, whether it is medical, school, personal, whatever, he has to consult with us just to make sure that he understands the information, because he really has severe communications problems, like with processing language. So sometimes he misunderstands what is being told, and he could, make like a bad decision just because of that.
Thank you, Sarah. So the next one, next kind of question is, some of you touched on it a little bit, and it's up to you who would like to go. But can you talk a little bit, like you mentioned chores, Nicole, what are some of the things that you helped prepare when your children were in high school? What were some of the things that you did to help prepare them for adult life? Things you did then, things that you're still doing now, right? Because we always continue to learn and grow.
So may I go?
Sure.
Okay. So I absolutely agree that chores are essential, but I think we need to start it well before high school. And I think, we need to think back if anybody had a typical kid who went to a preschool where all the kids were given jobs and they were very proud of those jobs. I think chores and jobs, little jobs, help give our kids confidence, and they also set the expectation that they are going to be working as adults. And it also gives them some basic job skills. I also, for in our situation, I have three children, so we included Philip as often as we possibly could in the same types of activities that they did, including going to overnight camp. We found a camp that was very welcoming and very inclusive. Um, but I think that that really helped push him along in terms of gaining more independence. Always included him in going out into the community and just being involved in the community, going to church, going on errands, to instead of keeping him at home. So he also had to learn how to behave appropriately out in a mixed setting. Um, and he also loves to sing, has always loved to sing. So I fought very hard for him to be included in the school choruses. And now that he's no longer in school and as an adult, he sings in the chorus at Nova's, it's Nova's community chorus. And I've worked with the director. He has modified involvement, but nevertheless, he has involvement, and that's been a very important thing for him. So, but also, I think very importantly, we always talked to him and had him have the expectation that when he was going to be older, he was going to be working at a job.
Thank you, Janet.
Sure.
Does anybody else want to talk to that?
Sure. Do you want to go, the same way?
Yeah, we can go around
Yeah.
the
So
same way.
no, I mean, so next would be Nicole, right?
Nicole, do you want to speak to that?
Sure. Yeah, so like Janet mentioned, we did start younger with our son, teaching him various chores. And like the perfect example now, one of his chores was always doing the laundry. He started out with here at home, he was just doing the towels every week. Although I think during the pandemic, he got really bored, so he's just started doing everybody's laundry to the point where we actually had to put a lock on the door because until I taught him what goes into what type of water and stuff like that, because everything went into towel dry. So I lost a lot of yoga pants that way. But he loves doing laundry. He's very good at it. He just has to teach him. You have to teach him for the different machines. So now that he's in the group home, he does his laundry, and they didn't have to teach him because he already knew once they got him used to the machine. So those kinds of skills are very transferable. And then I think the community ties also. So we're very close with our church, and he helps out with the food bank there. He does ushering there sometimes, helps with the communion and all these things. So just the expectation that you're like a working member, an involved member of our family and our community is really important. And he enjoys it too. He looks forward to doing all those things.
Thanks, Nicole. Donna?
I think our daughter is the oldest one of the children on this call, the adult children. I have to tell you, guilty as charged. We had really big goals, and those activities of daily living, it was like year after year. If we had waited for Emma to master the things she needed to master to move out of the house and start her adult life, I think she'd still be in the family home. So I'm going to make everybody relax a little bit and let you know that there is no finish line. Emma continues to get better all the time and has more skills and is learning to do different things. And we should always be preparing for the future. But I think one of the things we need to recognize is that there will be supports there. So you figure out what they can do, what they want to do, and also then figure out what the supports they need to do. Like if I can, we just gave up on tying shoes, and we just, the accommodation was, whatever, the Velcro shoes, or, whatever it is, we can get assistive technology. We can do all these other things. We can get her, help to fix her meals, and not burn down the apartment building. So, whatever it is, I think we have to recognize we want to get them as far along as we can get them, but also that there are supports that can help them do the things that they need support with, and there's no shame in that, and that you can still live a very full and rich life and still need these kind of supports. But the one thing they really do need our help with, I think almost across the board, is finding community. And Nicole talked about that. And that is something you can never start too early. We would never have had the confidence to move Emma out of the family home if we hadn't been able to convince 2 other families to do it with us. The fact that she can go on a community walk with, 30 people is huge. So you really need to be identifying who are your people, who are the people that could, different ages, all of that. Like, what does that look like, and how is that going to sustain your child's life? Everything everyone's describing is so rich and beautiful, and there can be travel and there could be all these things. But what happens when we're not here? So I think that will be a transition through life.
Thanks, Donna.
Okay.
Sarah, go ahead.
Okay, so hopping on what Janet had mentioned before about, teaching children skills and starting as early as possible. As a teacher, I would tell you that, start as soon as possible, because children, especially autistic children, get to school with what is called learned helplessness, meaning they are used to having parents do anything for them, everything. So I think understanding that they are capable, having expectations, setting those expectations wherever you can. I mean, based on the ability of the child, but never underestimate what they can do, even a little bit. It really doesn't take that much. So it's important to start as early as possible. As for my son, I would say that we started when he was around 10. The goal was independence, especially around the house. So he can take care of the house. We could even be away for like 24 hours, and he would know, what he has to do, how to take care of himself, grooming, cleaning, fixing a meal, even if it's like the frozen in the microwave or in the oven, teaching him not to be scared to use, appliances and all this kind of stuff has been huge, huge, because we're always stretched as parents in 10,000 directions, and other things like that he feels comfortable walking in the neighborhood, walking downtown. We are in Reston, and he goes everywhere by himself as long as he can walk. He doesn't drive. I don't want to say yet because he doesn't feel sure at this point. So I don't know in which direction it's going, but we're definitely helping him become comfortable in a Uber and in the metro, so that in the future, wherever he's going to go, whatever job he's going to get, he can move independently. As for working, he started working when he was 15 as a busser in a restaurant for 2 years in a row. And after he volunteered at Cornerstone in Reston for like a year as an admin assistant. They taught him how to file, how to close contract, little things, but he was very happy to go there. So I think trying to match your child's interest with the volunteer position, with the eventually jobs. Like he absolutely hated the busser's job because it was too fast, too loud. Everybody was screaming. It was too much. I think he really likes quiet, and an office situation was the best for him. But unless you try and you experience this kind of thing, you don't know what what kind of environment is suitable for them. And just expecting them to do, just really entry jobs or just very humble job just because they have autism, I think is wrong. You just can go, you inform companies about what they have and what supports they have, and say, just let's give it a try. Let's try and see how it goes. That's how we did it with Cornerstones. And after that, he has gained an internship with USGS during the pandemic as a map editor. And we're just simple tasks that he could do based on the knowledge he has gained in college, but really simple tasks. And he was with them for 6 months. So I'm thinking, never underestimate what they can do, and collaborate with companies, disclose their disability, because there is no need to hide, especially when it will be visible. As soon as they start talking, expressing themselves, there is no reason to hide it. It makes things much worse. So I think start early, teach them all the skills to become independent. Another thing that Janet mentioned that did I say correct? Donna, sorry. Donna, sorry. I wrote everybody's name, sorry. Donna said, and I agree with her, which is it takes a village, to raise our kids. We cannot do it on our own. Do not be embarrassed to ask for help, to ask for information, to network with people. Just because you need a one thing and maybe you didn't know them, just go for it. Just there, because that's the way we support each other. I think that's very important. That's how I always found help for my son, really.
Thank you, Sarah. You all have the same advice, and that's so good. But I think what you said was super important about like volunteering or jobs. Every experience helps us to know what we like and what we don't like. And that's the more exposure they have to different things, the better it is. Um, so if you could talk a little bit about what providers that you're currently working with, whether they're residential, school, employment, day support. If Nicole and Donna, you could touch on that a little bit.
Okay. So as I mentioned, our son is in a group home right now. What I have found is that the provider is okay, but you do have to stay on top of things yourself and check on things. We're very, very fortunate. We found a home that is literally 8 minutes from our house. So we're there a lot, or my husband is there a lot now that I'm working at the school. So just staying on top of that. Probably one of the best places that I worked with when I was a support coordinator was Robbins Consulting, that does therapeutic consult services for people with the waiver. They do some amazing work with OT and speech and language consulting. So they were really awesome for some of the clients that I supported, and I'm hoping to get them to work with my son as well. We have him going to a couple day programs right now, and one of them is Chimes in Fairfax, not too far from Fair Oaks. They're okay. I have learned that no program is going to be exactly what you want for your kid necessarily, but if it's a place where you feel that they're safe and they're getting some kind of enjoyment out of it, that's okay. It doesn't have to be the perfect program. I fussed and just waited a long time because I didn't like little things here and there, but I've decided that he's going to stay there. He's happy there. And then I've combined it with another program that's not a waiver program, a Purposeful Day, which I absolutely love. And that is actually about as close as it gets to being a perfect program for him, for anybody. And so he does that 2 days a week. So just sort of mixing and matching providers to try to get what you want. And then the thing with group homes also is that the staffing is really hard to maintain. And so they have the minimum staffing legally required, which means that in this particular house, there's, including my son, 4 young men living there. If one person doesn't want to do anything, then they don't go out. So we have utilized community coaching. And we have a coach that comes and does things with them when we're not able to, or just to supplement it so he's not just with us all the time. And so I have found that type of service to be very, very helpful. Yeah, and so those are the main things I've used.
Thanks, Nicole.
Oh, sorry. Thanks.
No.
So, first of all, our providers, I would say a big one is Safe and Home, which is, safe home technology. And, a lot of us can start using that before you even get your family outside, you get your loved one out of the family home. But it has really helped us up our game. I saw someone had a question in the Q&A about behaviors. I hate that word, but that is what the word looks at it, right? I mean, these are manifestations of the diagnosis, but you're right. I mean, our guys can be kind of loud, or there can be, issues around self-harm or hurting other people. But one thing that we found is I think we've really upped our game, and we're to the point where like we have sensors, no cameras, but we now have a pretty good recording of, how many times she's up at night. And having that kind of information, we're also getting ready to get her a smartwatch. So then if we have a day where she's really dysregulated, we're kind of pulling in this data to look and see, whoa, well, you'd be dysregulated too, right? If you had been up 20 times between 2 and 4 a.m. So that has been a really responsive vendor. And as Emma has progressed, we have kind of changed the technology we are using. but we have been really pleased with the support they've been able to get us. We do have an OT who comes to us through the waiver, Gretchen Ward, and she's been amazing because she's a total techie. And because our daughter's a speller, she's been able to kind of work on her communication side and then help us best utilize all of this technology, which has been really important. One of the providers we use, which is not funded by the waiver, is Spark. It's kind of similar to the program Nicole just talked about. And it's wonderful because it's inclusive and there's a high kind of intellectual bar for that. But it, quite frankly, there is, I mean, the threshold, it's going to be hard for a lot of families to pay for that. I think my daughter, she pays $375 to go 2 days a week, which is kind of the right amount of time we want her to go. But, that's, more than, it's almost half of her monthly budget. So, we're really trying to, I know I sit in the DD committee in Arlington, and I know everyone is having this conversation. The providers are having the conversation. We need more hybrid options, and we need more inclusive options. And everybody hears us, like Service Source. Everybody understands that is a frustration that a lot of us are having as families. So I think I can say that my understanding is Hope is on the way, and they will respond to that. Like, they know all the caseload in all the counties is really high, but the subscription to the traditional day programs is really actually pretty low. So they're going to have to respond, and we just need to keep saying that, this is what we want. And, most of our guys want to work a little, want to do a bunch of different things. So that'll be a little bit of advocacy. But yeah, that's pretty much it for her. Oops, Diane, you're on mute. Sorry.
Thank you. That kind of leads me into the next question about building a meaningful life and how do you do that? And you all touched on that a little bit about, joining different activities, building community. If this is open to all of you, if you want to talk a little bit about how you've done that for your child, including their activities, how did you get people involved in their lives? Janet, if you want to go.
Yeah, okay. Well, first of all, Philip works 2 jobs, but that totals 15 hours a week. And he is able to take 2 buses independently to get to one of his jobs, but he has to take a cab to get to the other one because it's just too complicated to try to get there with public transportation. But that still leaves a huge amount of time in his week. As I mentioned earlier, he sings in the local community chorus. That's one evening a week and 4 concerts a year. So that's a pretty exciting thing for him to do. He and I take private voice lessons together on Saturday morning, and that's a real highlight of his week as well. He also takes himself independently to the local rec center one day a week to go swimming. He ushers at church on a regular basis. He participates in the Therapeutic Rec Adult Social Club. So, but he still has too much time on his hands. And I think one of the things that we have to be cognizant about is that once they age out of school, then this is a huge and dramatic change in their lives. They're missing the social structure of being in school. They're missing just the structure of their days that they had when they're in schools. So I think that all parents need to be aware that at least that first year when they're no longer in school is going to be full of a lot of challenges. Probably more upset, more, as Donna said, dysregulation. That is, something. But I think we have to be constantly trying to find communities for our kids so that they do have a life. I mean, rather than just sitting around with nothing to do, and they're going to be super dysregulated if they don't have anything to do.
Nicole.
Thanks, Janet. Nicole, do you want to touch on that at all?
Yeah, just to the point of the first year, out after the student leaves the school system, I was very anxious about it leading up to that time. And I'd always heard all the phrases, falling off the cliff. But the woman that does A Purposeful Day has a great idea for it, that she sees it more as like jumping up and, just sort of flying free. And that to some extent, and this is not applicable to everybody, but to some extent, it can also be a very freeing time where you're not confined by what you need to do for school, and it leaves you open to trying new things, trying different things, maybe things that you wanted to do before, but you were in school, so you couldn't. So I tried pretty quickly to try to turn my thinking around. It's like, well, let's look at this as a time of possibilities. So while there are definitely challenges, I don't want to minimize that. I would also encourage families to see it as potentially a time for some great new discoveries for everybody involved, to try to find different things that are fun for your individual to do, more challenges that they can try. So it could be a little bit of both.
Donna, I know you agree with that sentiment.
I do agree with that. It was definitely a parachute. I mean, I think our daughter's life really began when she left the school district. She actually is an Arlington County dropout. She just had to stop. It was just too much madness. So, absolutely. I think, Emma's very engaged, but our Stomping Ground now has 120 hours of free programming a month. So, between social justice group on Monday and book club on Tuesday and, free art therapy and community walks, we know for her regulation, it's really important to get her exercise up. So she walks, probably spends about 2.5 hours walking a day. And most of those walks, about 10,000 steps a day, are in community. There's definitely an OSG walk every day. And then there's weekend walks and monthly walks, which are really exciting. They go into Georgetown, they go into the city, go see exhibits. So just lots of opportunities for her to do that. And, trying to always keep it kind of intellectually stimulating. So we're, because of her communication, we're always trying to do kind of daily lessons and, read The Economist to her and let her listen to podcasts and be engaged that way. So it's been really a nice time for us as well. We feel like we've had to do a little bit of catch up. Nowhere in Virginia has totally inclusive schools. So there had been a lot that she hadn't been exposed to because of the way her disability presents. So we find it really exciting that really the sky's the limit and we can do, and she can do whatever we want to do. And like today, her aide wasn't able to go to Spark with her. So it was like, okay, we'll go to the pool in the morning, right? There are opportunities that while we are young enough and can do this to support them, it's kind of fun. So thank you. Love that question.
Thanks, Donna. Sarah?
Yeah, I've always thought that one of the most important things as they grow older would be how to manage their free time. So I'm on the same page as the others. So we started very early to engage him with different activities. We explored sports, visiting the libraries, wanting, expecting him to read even in his free time, choosing a genre that he likes so that he can continue doing it even when he's not in school. It then becomes a favorite activity, going to the movies. So, I mean, in this way, he can use his free time meaningfully without relying solely on video games, because it's the default, free time activity. And we continue to work on this and presenting him with different choices all the time. And so it's a journey that evolves with time. So right now, I think really the focus is just to help them manage free time as they grow older, because otherwise is, by the time they're done with school, whether it is high school or 1 year of college or certificate, whatever it is, even if they go to work and they have the weekends off, it's like, how would you employ that time? What would you do if your parents were not here? How would you, spend your time by yourself? So it's a combination of a lot of things, and I think evolves with time and also the resources that we have available. I mean, it's not just, taking him around and just let's try this for the sake of it. It's also based on, trying to connect him with his interest, always finding something that he likes it to start with and connect it with that.
Sarah, so these kind of next two questions are for Janet and Sarah, just about because you both have children who are in post-secondary education. So if you can talk a little bit about that, and then Janet, if you can share a little bit about your experience with Philip learning to public transportation, that would be great.
Sure. So with regard to using the public transportation, certainly the foundation was set by school because in their career prep program that he participated in, the kids always took public transportation to their individual job sites. So I think that was very helpful in terms of just setting a foundation for him. But when it came time to be figuring out how he could get to his jobs, as I mentioned earlier, he has to take a cab to one because it's just impossible. But for the other one, he walks to the bus stop. He takes the local city bus to the hospital, and then he gets a metro bus to work. What I ended up doing for that was hiring one of the aides from his career prep class. And she was a lovely woman and she knew him well, and he knew her and was happy to work with her. And I think they probably went out, I think it was about 13 times. And she mimicked the way they had done it at school. So that was all familiar to him as well. And he was very, very proud. And in fact, if somebody says, well, do you want me to drive you to work today? No, I got this. I mean, he's very proud of doing that. The only time we actually take him to that job ourselves is if it's a day when there's a holiday and the buses aren't running. Or there were a couple of times this summer it was so hot that the buses broke down. But beyond that, this is something that he's very comfortable doing. But I will add that if he moves to a different job, we'll probably have to go to a similar process to teach him how to get to that job as well. And very importantly, he has an app on his phone so that I can track him, which is for my feeling just happier about it. And also we make sure that he wears a reflective sash so that if he's coming home now that it's going to start to be dark when he's coming home from work, I at least can feel like he's safer doing that.
Thanks, Janet. Do you want no? So you might as well just go in. Do you want to talk a little bit about your experience with? He goes to George Mason. You have a son that goes to George
No,
Mason.
actually, it's my older son.
Older son.
Yeah. So my older son, who is also on the spectrum but has very low support needs, he actually is on the 10-year plan for college, apparently. But he started out going to Nova, which is something I always recommend to families that I'm working with, just because I think it's helpful in terms of being able to get used to an academic situation without having to deal with the social challenges of college right away. He did that. He changed his major, so he ended up staying at Nova for 4 years instead of 2. Then he transferred to George Mason. That was a challenge because even though in my job I do a lot with helping people with executive function challenges, apparently since I'm mom, why would he listen to me? We all know this with our own teenagers. So that he had some struggles with that and ended up taking some time off, which coincided with a period of time when his father was sick and passed away. But then he went back to school. We got him hooked up with a coach again. And so hopefully at this point, I think he's got another 3 semesters. And hopefully, all will go well with that. But also, he is actually still living at home. Now, his very mean mother gave him the choice. He could either learn to drive so he could take himself to school, or he had to live on campus. And apparently, it was less onerous to learn to drive. But, we do have to give them their choices in these things.
Thanks, Janet.
You're welcome.
And Sarah, Lawrence goes to Nova. So similarly,
Yes.
can you talk a little bit about Nova and your experience with that and college steps?
I think it has been great so far, in the sense that okay, let me just step back 1 second, because the first 2 years we are going on the third year, it was kind of like traumatizing for him because he had not learned up until that point. I don't think it's because they didn't teach him. I don't think he was ready, but they didn't teach him, like studying skills. So he was not able to do like things like summarizing the text, underlining, retaining, and stuff like that. So we had to stop several times along the way, just really to focus on these skills so that I wouldn't be with him all the time. And my commitment was like, okay, I'm going to be with you for a couple of years, teach you these things, but the goal, the ultimate goal is that you start doing this on your own, which we did. College Steps crossed our path, and CSB provides the funds for this program that is both academic and social skills. I didn't think the academic was very efficient. I thought that they expected a little bit too much out of the kids. Like the kids are supposed to guide them and explain to them what they need and how to fill out a planner. And I think for a freshman, even like a typical, student, you need to really explain step by step these skills and help them connect the dots. And I think we were all getting very frustrated. And I said, okay, let's remove the academic and just keep the social skills. The social skill has been very, very good because they have peers, people the same age, that they mentor him. They do like real life activities like going to the cafeteria, eating together, creating clubs that can be attended by all the other NOVA students. And also there is an academic session that is also very important because he's learning how to interview for a job, present himself, build a resume, connect the resume, connect his experience with the job description, search for jobs, all things that he's learning with them. So I think I'm very, very happy. And as Nicole mentioned before, the No program is perfect. Is fine. There are, I think wherever you go, there's going to be some flow, but overall, I think something that I really like about the college step stuff is that they're very open to suggestions. They're open to brainstorming with parents and try to create the conditions for skills to develop. Because sometimes they have maybe a club and, my son might not be interested. And it's like, okay, what are we going to do this semester? There isn't anything he's interested and we got X amount of hours. How are we going to use them? And they always ask him, what would you like to work on? And I think this is fantastic because there's a lot that I would like him to work on. And having, the stuff available to do it, I think is very, very helpful. And I think that's where we are with the secondary experience, and the support we get, just to summarize, comes from College Steps at the moment. And I think is really pretty good for where we're at.
Great. Thank you. For families who are interested in College Steps, they're actually coming either next week or the week after to talk about their services. So we have 10 minutes left. So I'm going to combine the last two questions and then you'll each have a turn to talk about any advice you have for families, what you wish you knew, now that you knew then, or that you wish you knew then that you know now, and also goals that you and your child have for the future. And then we'll open it up to questions. I see a lot of people put questions into the chat and you all have been answering them. So thank you.
So one of the goals that I have is to figure out housing for my child. And I've been listening and I'm very interested to hear what Nicole and Donna have had to say with regard to that. I have to admit it's something I worry a lot about. But I do think that it's important for us as parents to really be addressing this issue because the reality is we're not going to live forever. And we want to get our kids settled before they have to deal with the loss of us as parents, if possible. That's one of my big goals to start figuring out. But I think along with that, and I'm sure those parent of you whose kids are already settled have done this is to talk about a lot about, well, at some point you're going to be living in a group home, or you're going to be living in an apartment, or whatever it might be. As with everything else with these individuals, we need to prepare and prepare and prepare and talk about it so that they are ready for those big transitions when they come along. As far as things that I wish I knew, well, the biggest thing is I wish I had a crystal ball and I could see what and get into that child's mind and figure out what's going on. But I think I wish that I had found various resources earlier than I did. Um, I think it would have been helpful if I hadn't felt so isolated and alone. And I think it's important for us as parents to recognize that the pediatrician is not necessarily going to be the best resource for us. We need to reach out to other families. We need to take advantage of things like this series that the ARC puts on. And, you know, listen to others, listen to their experiences, and then figure out what might be applicable in our own situation. But we do need to be preparing for the future in so many ways. Start as early as you can with your child. Have them be doing those chores, build their independence to the greatest extent possible. And, that's what I would say.
I think my big goal is going to be to try to get our son to move into our stomping ground apartment at some point. And I still would like to do that. Um, and I think to do that, I wish I had worked even more in broadening the community of supports that we would have for him. So I wouldn't be so worried and anxious filled about possibly moving him into an apartment. I talk a lot about community, but I think I could have done a better job on that. And then the last thing, because of the time, the age of our son and everything, I think we were very kind of old school ABA. And one of the downsides of that I have found over the years is that he is not able to make choices. I can offer him choices, but he just looks at me like, so what do you want me to say, kind of thing. So I wish I had taught him or presented things to him in a way that he would learn to make his own choices, that's okay, whether it's to say yes or no, or to say I want this as opposed to that. So as much as possible, try to give your individual choices. Thanks.
Donna.
I have a new favorite podcast called Expanding Worlds Podcast, a woman in the UK, but she interviews people all over the world. And one of her things is always to encourage families to help their children, young and old alike, to find their purpose. And I think that's such an amazing way to look at this journey. And, from a very early age, it's just like wherever you are, wherever you live, whoever you know, whatever you can or cannot do, we all need to have purpose in life. And that's really when life has meaning. And that's something that I wish we had started sooner, but I would encourage everyone that is a really kind of, I think it takes the weight off of our shoulders, and it's a different way to look at what has value. And so I would encourage you to check out that podcast. I'll put a link in here, and then also to help your young adult find their purpose. So thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight, Diane. I've learned a lot.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sarah?
Yes. Okay. So I think our main goal for him is to live independently in a place of his choosing, and to find a job that he truly enjoys and can sustain. The things that I wish I had known and would have made my life much, much easier were to understand his diagnosis, like understand how autism affects, your child. That is my suggestion. Don't sit on those reports. Try to have somebody explain to you how those reports translate into daily life, because the language is so mysterious. It's so the medicalese, how I call it, that sometimes we don't understand it. It's too difficult. But it's important to understand how it affects the child's, daily function, how it affects him cognitively, and all the things that he can do. So I think it's important to take the time to learn how autism affects your child, how special education can work for them. your child will spend a large part of their life in the school system before they transition to adulthood. So understanding the system and knowing how to advocate for them, I think is the key. So if you have any question, please feel free to reach out to me. Diane, I know that will share my email at the end of the presentation, and I'm happy to help in any way I can. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you all for being here. Let's, for those who maybe joined a little bit late, we have, I will share everyone here said it's okay to share their email, so you can feel free to reach out with questions. We do have, everyone mentioned community and support from other families. We do have a transition support group that Nicole started actually at the ARC of Northern Virginia that meets every month in person. And I can send that schedule out to everybody. The next one is coming up in November. Let me look in here at any questions. Any transition suggestions? You touched on this, Donna, I think. Any transition suggestions for a medically challenged young adult that needs support with behaviors?
You know, I have to say, we've had a lot of friends that fall into this category. I have to say that I haven't seen anyone who doesn't do better when they start having opportunities to make choice. And, you know, I think especially for our friends with communication issues. So I would just keep exploring. Don't give up. There should be supports through your caseworker, but also just see how things go. If, you know, your young adults gets a good gross motor diet, has things to look forward to, and you know, I think taking the pressure off when you get out of the classroom and all these things you can't do, and maybe finding again that purpose and what they love to do. I have found that so many people that I thought no way possible could be living out in the community because of these kind of challenges. And they are just thriving when they have a little bit more control over their life. And I'd be happy to talk more offline later. So thank you. Good luck.
Several of you mentioned some different kinds of support organizations. A Purposeful Day was one, Spark, Social Grace. These are kind of startups all by families, right, who have done great things. We have a list that is on for families who are listening. We have a list on our transition series Padlet about connecting to adult services, and all of the places that everyone mentioned tonight is in that list. So I would encourage you to check that out and research some of those. Does anybody have any other questions? They're welcome to type it into the chat. There is a question in this, I don't know if anyone has particular experience with this. Someone who wishes to meet others, but she's experienced a traumatic event. So obviously it's difficult for her. So a couple of resources. I don't know a specific social group, but we just had a presentation from EASE today about empowerment, advocacy, and sexual education. Not everything they do is all around sex education, but it is about developing healthy relationships. And they do have a lot of resources around that. As far as other groups, I'll have to look into that and I can try and send something out.
Diane, do you think the Jewish Community Center would have anything?
Oh, they might. Yeah, the Jewish Community Center may have some. That's a good suggestion, Nicole. And that's something that I can also send out, or I can type it here into the chat.
And then Social Grace also.
Any other questions? Yeah, and Donna, thanks for that suggestion. OSG has tons of really good, safe environment, uh, social activities, supportive. I'm gonna stop recording here and then we can take a couple of questions if people still have them. I just want to say thank you all so, so very much for being here. Just super information. It was great to be with you all. So let me stop recording.